Thanks. Good morning. So actually, internet video is one piece of what I'm going to talk about. First, I'm going to, before everybody else talks, I'm going to talk a little bit, just give a broad overview of sort of internet trends and technology and trends in consumer behavior that I think will set then everything in context so that then my colleagues here will talk more about specific pieces of overall sort of internet landscape and digital media landscape. So as Ted mentioned, we have assembled our team here. We have Diane Giannini, who's our Director of Corporate Sales Solutions, and Mark Heinberg, who's Director of Research and Development, as well as Michael Kirchhoff, our Director of SEO. So we have an agenda of a number of things to cover. First, I'm going to talk about the evolution of digital media technology, and then dig in a little bit into online video before I hand it off here. So digital media technology has been changing rapidly, whether you want to call it an evolution or revolution. Over the last 5 to 10 years, technology has continued to accelerate in terms of the pace of change. It's becoming increasingly hard to keep up with, which is one of the reasons why we're having this discussion. So specifically, I'm going to cover a couple of pieces here. One, talking about changes in consumption of media among users, especially in the United States, technology and trends in general, a couple of new marketing vehicles. That's kind of not really a reference to the flying car there, but you know, it's a little pun, all right? And then talk a little about online video. This is, for me, we talk about changes in media consumption habits. This is a really striking graph that shows essentially the destruction of an industry here, in this case, the music industry. You can see peaking there in about 2001 in terms of sales, about 15 billion in sales, mostly in CDs. And then we get Napster in about 99, 2000. So essentially we have peer-to-peer networking and broadband connections coming out, which then, as you can see, drive sales and cut them over the last 10 years about in half, based on, you know, essentially technology crushing the old business model. For me, this is one of the most striking charts that I've seen in a long time. It covers a very long period there from about 1900 to current day, and actually projects out about the next 10 years. It's from a consulting group called Carrot. This is a chart that shows the number of hours per week that Americans spend consuming media. And all the way down to the far left and around 1900, and they actually have studies that they source this from, it's not just guesses. Americans on average spend about 10 hours a week, so roughly a little more than an hour a day consuming media, typically newspapers and books. If you move almost all the way to the right, you can see we're around present day. People are spending about 70 plus hours a week consuming media. So, and really the consumption of print has gone down some, but it's certainly not gone away. But all these new media types have added up. And the biggest boost you can see sort of in the sort of blue-green area there has been TV. And then very recently, the last about 15 years, going from almost nothing to now about, you know, will be about 15, 20 hours a week, is internet consumption. So you can see the vast change that's occurred where people are now consuming this is more than 10 hours a day by 2020 of media every single day. So at work and at home, people are always on. This sort of just summarizes, but adds a few pieces here. So not only are people consuming way more media than they ever have, they're also consuming it in different ways, in the ways they want to. So throw out some terms like place shifting and time shifting and device shifting. Basically, it means people are connecting wherever they are, however they want, whenever they want. You know I personally, you know, I can't remember the last time I watched a TV show live. I pretty much, you know, the commercials just drive me nuts. So I record them, and even if they start, I'll go do something else and wait 15 minutes until I can start fast forward past the commercials. And increasingly, people are consuming via the internet. So even, you know, I know the cable companies are seeing a big risk now that their business could go away as more and more users shift to online video. Another big change is people aren't just so-called leaning back anymore. It's not just leaning back and reading what's presented to them, they're interacting. So that's why, you know, we talk about whether it's comments or various social networks or whatever device we want to talk about, people are contributing and blogging and uploading their own videos and that sort of thing, as well as consuming video at the same time, or consuming content at the same time. People also are using more and more sources. There was a stat that years ago when I started working the internet about 1998, that the average person had, it was I think 12 websites that they visited really on a regular basis, and they were sort of a max. That number, a recent report I saw, was up to in the low 20s. So that still doesn't seem like that many, but I think if you look at your own behavior, you can see you probably have a handful of sites you visit. And so really, essentially, even though people are going to more and more sources for more and more types of information. And they're also demonstrating a very marked preference for video, which I'll show here in a minute. This is also one last comment, which actually Michael will cover here more about social media here in a minute. But when we say people are using social networks, that makes it sound like that they're on there with the other 500 million people on Facebook and connecting to all of them, when in reality, people are creating their own networks. So when you think about social media, it's really how people are going to these various networks and then creating their own network out of what's there. So this chart points out a few key changes over just the last 10 years, and I'll just hit a couple of them. But in 2000, about 5% of Americans had broadband at home. Now we're at 65%, so about 2/3, which is a tremendous change. 0% used to connect to internet wirelessly. Now about 60%. Nobody used technology, social networks in 2000 because they didn't exist. Now about half of all Americans use them. So this sort of summarizes as in 2000 we had slow stationary connections built around a computer typically sitting on a desktop or under your desktop, whereas then now the more typical behavior is using fast mobile connections to content that is out somewhere on outside servers. You probably can't read this, but this is just to make a point regarding the pace of technological change. This is from a consulting group called Gartner. They actually have and maintain about 75 or so charts of this type simultaneously. This is just one of their, they call it the technology hype cycle, but it's essentially the life cycle of technology coming from just a grand idea to actually being usable. And they track about 1,800 different specific technologies. So this is one chart covering about 50 of them. And you have everything from here over on the right, which are becoming real technologies these days, speech recognition, electronic paper, et cetera, to things that are way on the left, that are things like computer-brain interfaces and human augmentation, which are grand ideas, and they're actually getting a lot of press in some areas these days, but probably aren't going to really impact us significantly for a while. I don't know if that's 10 years or 5 years. The point here being that this is one of 75 different areas, so you can imagine just the volume of technological change that is coming our way over the next few years. And this is a chart that covers about as much as a 5 to 10 year time frame. So specifically, some of these major changes, I'm just going to highlight a couple of them to think about for your business. Mobile computing, which I know everybody is obviously aware of, but if you're hopefully taking advantage of things like iPads and BlackBerries in your sales force, for example. These are things that can really impact your business. Just imagine when your sales reps carrying around an iPad doing live demos, virtual representations of your products, that sort of thing can be very impactful. Some people are already doing those things, but those are things that really you can take technology that really works and move it quickly into business. Social networking, I know we have, Michael spends a lot of time working on social networking, he'll cover that. But social networking can really have an impact on your business. We drive a lot of traffic off of our social network plans and usage, and we're going to do a lot more in that area. One point, this thing calling web services here, I know one strategy that we use is we don't do as much buying or building software and putting on our own servers as we used to. We do a lot of partnering via web services. So that's one thing you can think about, whether you call it software as a service or just tying into other people's functionalities via web services. If you look at one of our websites, it's actually, the foundation is ours, But depending upon where you're at, there's at least 10 different vendors we use that supply different things on various websites that we have. So that's something that I know if you're involved in technology, make sure you're really thinking about, do we really need to buy this, or is this something we can actually pull in via web service from somebody else? Online video I'll cover here in just a moment. I won't get into all these other things in depth. Semantic Web, though, is one thing that's you may or may not have heard of, but it's making the web a lot more useful. This is where, like, for instance, we tag all of our content. And by tagging, it means we have humans, so editors who write it, and put tags on it that say what it's about. And say, we also think it's about these things. It's about, fire rescue, or it's about, even it might be about a given company. So we'll tag it. But then our functionalities let us use that content in many different ways based on we want to now show all articles that mention President Obama or whatever, a given, like the Japanese disaster or whatever. So this is something to keep in mind when you're creating content for your own websites, is to try and do tagging or look at technologies that allow you to tag. I'll skip some of these others. So when we talk about new marketing vehicles, and this is some things that we actually have available now, is, for instance, I don't know if anybody in here is doing any advertising via in any mobile apps. Something we currently have. We have for instance, fire engineering, we have both an iPhone and an iPad app. We also are developing mobile-friendly sites that will be out in a few months. So, we're taking a multifaceted approach. We're not doing one or the other. We're trying to say, however somebody wants to come to one of our websites, we're going to offer them a website that works well for them. So we're going to detect when they come in, and we're going to say, okay, if you're a normal user on a PC, you'll get the regular site. If you're not a normal user, if you're using on a smartphone, we'll give you a smartphone optimized site. If you're a tablet user, we'll probably give you a tablet optimized site. That makes sure that that experience is exactly the best we can offer. And also along with that, there's advertising opportunities that are specific to those groups. Then we're also doing apps, because there's a lot of benefit. You can put more functionality in apps than you can just necessarily deliver over the web. So we're also offering device-specific apps, which Mark will go into here in a little bit. We're also offering rich media ads, and I know we're seeing a lot more of our customers starting to do things like video ads and some more than just a basic animated ad, something that we support. In many cases, you just have to ask us, and we'll see what we can do. There's also some things that on the horizon we don't have quite yet, but things you certainly could take advantage of, like daily deals or Groupons, which can be in the right circumstances very effective. Maybe not in the fire market. I don't know if anybody is going to go for a daily deal on a fire truck, but it depends on what you sell. If you sell T-shirts, it probably could work. Talk a little bit about online video here. This is a graph from Wired magazine. The title of that issue last year was "The Web is Dead," which is a little extreme from a viewpoint. So just to explain what this chart is, it's a stacked chart showing at the bottom in red there worldwide web traffic, or essentially web page traffic. And you can see it peaked in about 2000 as a percentage of overall bandwidth use on the internet, and has gone down dramatically. Now in reality, the actual amount of web pages served and bandwidth served has gone up dramatically. It just has gone down in comparison to what is now dominating bandwidth, and it's now more than 50%. That this has changed in the last few months even. Online video has gone in about 10 years from essentially being almost being negligible to being more than 50% of bandwidth use on the internet. So the point of this chart is essentially video and peer-to-peer to some services like the former Napster, now things like BitTorrent, really consume most traffic on the web. Some points about online video. You hear occasionally people think that online video is all about going to YouTube and watching videos like cats playing pianos or various cute videos, and that is the #1 usage. However, if you get to number 2 and 3, news videos and educational videos are really heavily consumed now. And when you look at the stats now, about half of all adults watch videos online, so it's really relevant for all of our markets. This is a stat that really blew me away when I first saw it, and actually I just saw a new study yesterday and didn't have time to update. here, but we'll just go with this study that came out middle of last year, showing that 44% of American news consumers get news from internet video, and that's more than any other source, including newspapers or radio, except for TV. I saw the Pew Internet, who's the source of the study, it's a nonprofit group, actually came out with a study just in the last couple of days saying it's now internet consumption of news has now surpassed TV. So I haven't had a chance to update this, but that's really an amazing stat. So that's my little overview. I'm going to pass on to Diane Giannini now.